Okay, so I started streaming a video about this, and gosh, I really just wanted to show the clip and talk about it, but I started ranting a bit, so we're just going to start with the clip.
But that's not the problem. You know, they're not the problem. The Conservatives aren't the ones shitting up the public dialogue. I mean, watching, like, the guy who did the Walk Away campaign, going on Tucker Carlson, you can tell that this guy's still 100% liberal. I mean, he seems like a real lefty, you know? And he's just like, Tucker, I just can't stand the SJWs, I can't stand what they're doing to the left. I would rather talk to centre-right people, because at least they understand the concept of civility. Even if we don't agree, we can at least we can discuss the ideas and the principles together. And I think the left can genuinely win on that. Like what I would call the 2008 Jon Stewart left, that I still feel the Christopher Hitchens sort of left that I still feel that I belong to. Then yeah, this is the confident left that can actually deal with ideas. My God, I think that we can. I think that we can have these conversations with the Conservatives and beat them on their own terms, as we did early in the late 1990s and early 2000s. We've had these conversations with the right. The Conservative right, are not scary in this way anymore. But we.
Okay. So I wanted to point a couple things out. So this is a 40-minute long video, and essentially this other guy is saying that Sargon is not
can't
get him out. That's uncharitable. There we go.
Have these conversations.
I'm trying to get a good
left.
Come on. There we go. Okay, that's an okay. I don't want to be uncharitable to Sargon with the pause. Okay, so the thing that Sargon's not realizing is that there's a difference between what we call the left in the United States and versus what they call the left in the United States. And also liberal. Dave Rubin's talked about this a bit too. There's a pretty big difference between left and liberal now. So Sargon isn't a liberal in the United States. He's also not on the left in the United States. You know, one of the big points, the big tests is, are you for socialism? Sargon's clearly not, and that's the big litmus test, as it's the purity test, so to speak, that the left requires of its people. But the thing about it is that, let me close that out. The thing about it is the Jon Stewart 2008 era, Jon Stewart and all that stuff, that doesn't exist anymore. It just doesn't. You know, even when you listen to, like, the intellectual dark web, right? That inane, weird label. They're just people, and they get called the alt-right, and they're just talking, right? And what Sargon's not realizing is that there is, in the United States, this is the United States, the line between left and right is certain to blur. It's not as defined. So social issues, right? Well, here in Oklahoma, we just passed medical marijuana, and recreational marijuana is up for the vote in the next vote later on in the year. We were one of the first states to pass gay marriage, and we are one of the reddest states. So conventionally, you would say, okay, well, they're red, they're conservative, and so they wouldn't pass medical marijuana with a 57% yes. Well, but we did. So it's, and you see other red states too that are doing this. The same thing as social. Like Trump is most certainly not anti-gay. You know. So it begs the question: what social issues are there what social issues do the left and right differ on? That aren't economically driven, right? Because as far as I can tell, like things like weed and the war on drugs, outside of somebody like Sessions, and here's the other key point too. I feel that Sargon, is basing his politics off of 10 years ago. You know, he talks about 2008 Jon Stewart. Well, that doesn't apply anymore. It's irrelevant. It doesn't exist. Like, Sargon thinks that he is, and he might hold those viewpoints, but those labels that he has don't apply anymore. Like, that's sort of the point that the other guy was making. Kind of. The other guy was just straight up calling Sargon a conservative, or some such crap, and Sargon's not a conservative. But he's also, in the United States, to their our standards, I guess, he's not a liberal either. And so, well, what is it? And it really, what it boils down to, and this is the big difference between the left and right now. It isn't that it isn't that it is actually left and right anymore. It is more of an up-down thing, right? How much government do you want? And even then, that's not always the case. Because it isn't necessarily a libertarian versus, I don't know, fascist dichotomy. It's more of a American politics it's very complicated right now. It's not as simple as it was in 2008. And so the guy that Sargon was making this video about is right in that he's not a liberal, because liberals now, well, see, and here's where it's complicated, because somebody like Dave Rubin, would still view himself as a liberal, and I guess he's right. But when you listen to him talk and the things that he says, boy, that sure sounds awfully conservative to me. Because what happens is that as we move from one status quo to the other, one way, because it's going to ebb back and forth some, right? And as we move a little bit further to the left, like in 2008, the 2008 Jon Stewart sort of leftist liberal sort of mindset that was very popular, and there's nothing wrong with that, because it was really just slightly left to center, right? And then we gravitated more and more. By we, I don't mean like personally. I mean the Overton window shifted more and more and more to the left. So now Jon Stewart just seems like a reasonable person for the most part. You know, except the big difference is that the difference between 2008 Jon Stewart and 2014-15 Jon Stewart is dramatic, because Jon Stewart also shifted with that window, while everybody else kind of stayed behind to where they were. And those that were part of that shift along with Jon Stewart further and further to the left continued to go further and further to the left, until we have, like, a picture like this woman right here, which really it's just a picture, you know, representative of a bunch of ideals that are kind of weird and don't make much sense. Identity and all sorts of garbage, you know. And so you got to understand, the Sargon has to understand that it's not, maybe he is a liberal, but to somebody that's somebody that is so far left, right, that they think that Sargon is an SJW. It's you have to understand that in that context, yeah, dude, you're not a liberal anymore. And when, maybe you're, see, and this is where it's really fucking tricky, because you wouldn't label yourself as a conservative. I wouldn't either, but I also don't label myself as a liberal. But I do label myself as a conservative, because if I don't label myself as a conservative, right, it's in the great conversation, right, we end up like having a hard time figuring out our positions and what we stand for. For example, I'm a libertarian, right? And boy, what does that mean in the modern world? And doesn't mean a lot. You know, we had Gary Johnson as, on a political party standpoint, we had Gary Johnson, who is very much not a libertarian, but he ran for the party. So what does it mean to be libertarian? I don't fucking know. But what I do know is, I don't consider Trump to be a conservative. I barely consider him to be a Republican, but only because he ran that way. He's about as centrist as it gets. And yet, here we are, people on the left calling him far right. Now, I'm not. I don't view myself as far right. I view myself as about where Trump is, and I know that there are people that are further right than me. Plenty of politicians are, and they don't have extreme views at all. So, but then I look on the left, you know, and you have in the Ocasio chick, who I would view her views as extreme. And you would too, Sargon. You know, she's a socialist. You don't like socialists. That's a liberal in the United States now. So you gotta wear that lens when you're thinking about this sort of thing, because you know the difference. I don't know much about, you know, UK politics. I know you guys have the UKIP thing that's going on, where a bunch of liberalists are joining UKIP to try to manipulate the party. That's smart and cool. I think it's great. But you gotta, you know, look at it from the lens of, like, I don't know, with the United States. And this guy that you made the video with, who looked really fucking stupid, by the way, he'd sort of like, he views you as a conservative, because, you know, you got to understand, you know, you're not for immigration, you're against socialism, all the social issues like weed and gay marriage and all that shit. It's not a left issue anymore. You know, being pro-gay marriage and pro-drugs isn't a left thing anymore. It's not a liberal thing anymore. It's pretty much everyone. You know, so what you're left with are these issues like immigration and fiscal policy and how to solve... and it really, what it boils down to is, how do you get people out of poverty? What is your method? And that is really the defining thing between left and liberal and right and conservative. But even then, of course, we know that there are plenty of people that are left that aren't liberals. Or there are plenty of liberals that aren't left. And it's not so easy, but I understand where this guy's coming from in labeling you not a liberal and possibly as a conservative. I get it. And I think that's... I think it's something that you're missing from the video, that's all.